तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय जय श्री श्री राधा माधव की जय, श्री श्री गौर निताय की जय, श्री श्री ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, one should offer respectful obeisances unto personality of Godhead, Narayana, unto Narayana Rishi, who is supermost human being, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nashta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhakti bhavati naishtiki. By regular attendance in class on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service unto the pure devotees, destroys all the as an irrevocable fact. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 30th chapter, verse 20, titled Description of Adverse Fruitive Activities. Yātanā-deha āvṛtya pāśair baddvā gale balāt nayato dīrgham adhvānaṁ daṇḍyam rāja-bhaṭā yātanā-deha āvṛtya pāśair baddvā gale balāt nayato dīrgham adhvānaṁ daṇḍyam rāja-bhaṭā yathā yātanā-deha āvṛtya pāśair baddvā gale balāt nayato dīrgham adhvānaṁ daṇḍyam rāja-bhaṭā yathā. nayato dīrgham adhvānaṁ daṇḍyam rāja-bhaṭā yathā. yātanā-deha āvṛtya pāśair baddvā yātanā-deha āvṛtya Vaishnavis. yātanā-deha āvṛtya pāśair baddvā gale balāt nayato dīrgham adhvānaṁ daṇḍyam rāja-bhaṭā yathā. Yātanā, for punishment. Dehe, his body. āvṛtya, covering. pāśair, with robes. baddvā, binding. gale, by the neck. balāt, by force. nayato, they lead. dīrgham, long. adhvānam, distance. daṇḍyam, a criminal. rāja-bhaṭā, the king's soldiers. yathā, as. Translation by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada ki. As a criminal is arrested for punishment by the constables of the state, a person engaged in criminal sense gratification is similarly arrested by the Yamadūtas, who bind him by the neck with strong rope and cover his subtle body so that he may undergo severe punishment. Purport. Every living entity is covered by a subtle and gross body. The subtle body is the covering of mind, ego, intelligence, and consciousness. It is said in the scriptures that the constables of Yamarāja cover the subtle body of the culprit and take him to the abode of Yamarāja to be punished in a way that he is able to tolerate. He does not die from this punishment, because if he died, then who would suffer the punishment? It is not the business of the constables of Yamarāja to put one to death. In fact, it is not possible to kill a living entity because factually he is eternal. He simply has to suffer the consequences of his activities of sense gratification. The process of punishment is explained in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Formerly, the king's men would take a criminal in a boat in the middle of the river. They would dunk him by grasping a bunch of his hair and thrusting him completely underwater. And when he was almost suffocated, the king's constables would take him out of the water and allow him to breathe for some time. And then they would again dunk him in the water to suffocate. This sort of punishment is inflicted upon the forgotten soul by Yamarāja as will be described in the following verses. Translation one more time. As the criminal is arrested for punishment by the constables of the state, a person engaged in criminal sense gratification is similarly arrested by the Yamadūtas, who bind him by the neck with strong rope and cover his subtle body so that he may undergo severe punishment. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pishtaya Bhutali Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharini Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Pasyatati Sutarini. So this continues the conversation between Kapila Dev and Mother Devahuti. So in the previous chapter, Devahuti asks Kapila Dev two questions, that please explain to me the glories of devotional service. And she asks one more question. She asks Kapila Dev, also explain to me the time, the eternal time, the force of Kala. I want to understand that in detail. So in the last chapter, Kapila Dev explains about the devotional service. Now he is answering in this chapter the force of time through which he acts on all the living entities. And this actually whole chapter, the description of adverse fruitive activities, describes the most, we can say, unfortunate situation of the jiva in this material world. Because from the beginning to the end of this chapter, you will have a detailed description of how the jiva goes through suffering after suffering and suffering, endless suffering. And this verse and also previous verses, how he is punished after he leaves the body. Of course, even before leaving the body, he has to go through so many difficulties. Diseases and mental tribulations and so on and so forth. We have three kinds of sufferings. Adhyatmika, Adi-bhautika and Adi-daivika. Right? We all know that. The sufferings inflicted by the body and mind, sufferings inflicted by other living entities, and sufferings inflicted by calamities, nature, so on and so forth. So this whole experience of jiva is so, we can say, deep, that it causes a lot of impression in his body. Ultimately, the question is, why does jiva end up in this situation that he is just suffering, even though he is thinking that I am nicely situated in my family, I have a car, I have a bungalow, but ultimately he struggles so much to gather the money for his family, but when the time comes for his leaving, even the family members, they kind of ignore him. If you see the previous verses, when he becomes old, the wife and children kind of do not pay too much attention, because they know that in some time this man is going to go away. So he starts feeling so much of frustration internally. Anyways, the point here is this particular, we can say, idea of the jiva suffering has been repeated many times in our scriptures. Of course, in this chapter in Srimad Bhagavatam. In other cantos also, if you look at the fourth canto, where the story of Puranjana comes in, the whole description of Narada Muni's to, I think is it Prachina Varisat king, that he was attached to fruitive activities. He is explaining how a jiva suffers in this material world, struggling to maintain himself, trying to be happy, but ultimately all he receives is suffering. So the question is, how does the jiva fall into this situation? Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, Ichha dvesha samuthena dvandva mohena bharata sarva bhutani samyamya sarge yanti parantapa. That the jiva naturally develops ichha and dvesha. Ichha means desire and dvesha means hatred. Whatever we like, whatever the senses or whatever we like to do to give pleasure to senses is ichcha. We desire to do that more and more and more. But dvesha are those activities which you do not want to do. You avoid doing because that gives you suffering. You don't want, because that does not give pleasure to your senses. So he is in a dvandva mode, which means he develops duality. He develops attraction towards certain activities and he creates aversion towards some activities. So that duality continues life after life and life, and to the extent that jiva is now so much engrossed in sense gratification and giving pleasure to the senses, he just thinks that sense gratification is the whole and sole purpose of life. There is nothing else beyond this. So this is very nicely described in the chapter of Rishabhdev in 5th canto. He says that the jiva ends up in a situation that he just keeps on giving pleasure to his senses. He says, very nice verse, Nunam pravatta kurute vikarma yat indriya pritraya prunoti na sadhu manye jatvatmanoyam asannapi kleshadaha deha. They get to so much extent that Rishabhdev is saying sense gratification is vikarma. Vikarma. Karma is good actions, but vikarma is opposite, right? Which is viparita karma, sinful activities. So he gets down to that level of sense gratification that he ends up doing sinful actions each and every step. Like, eating meat and all that. They don't know it is sinful reaction, but they just keep on doing this. To the extent that they just completely get bound by this. And once they are bound by so much of sense gratification, they completely lose the identity that they are jivas, spirit soul. They just think that they are just the bodies and just engage in sense gratification. And because of that attachment, that person never develops the desire to question spiritual aspects. Where is the time for spiritual aspects? He just engages in sense gratification. And in the next verse, Rishabhdev nicely explains how this happens. He says, Parabhavastavad abode jata yavan na jigyasata tatvam yavat kriyastavad idam manovai karmatmakam yena sarira bandha. He says abodha jata. Abodha, bodha means intelligence, but abodha means ignorance. So all his activities are born out of ignorance. Why? Because he is covered with this illusion that he is a body. And he identifies only his relatives, his families as the whole and soul and nothing beyond that. And he works entire life in satisfying them. Abodha jata. And his mind becomes so much, contaminated and covered, like how on a cloudy day, even though the sun is there, but we cannot see it because it is covered with the cloud. The sun is still there, but we are all covered. Similarly, this jiva is completely now covered with ignorance, and he is now only endeavoring for sense pleasure, nothing beyond that. And for this kind of people, in this particular case, he is explaining a person who is a householder. Actually, he is not a grahastha, he is a grahamedhi. A grahastha is supposed to be, regulating his senses, engage in prescribed duties and all that. But in this particular case, more or less, Kapila Dev is talking about a grahamedhi. Grahamedhi is opposite of grahastha. He is just a mudha engaged in his household activities, so on and so forth. So, and then, what is the biggest sense gratification this person has in life, in household life? Sex pleasure. What else is there? Prabhupada explains about this point again and again in his lectures, because this is where many of us struggle. We accept or not accept, but this is where we are struggling. And this attachment to that pleasure becomes so strong that he thinks, what is that verse which says, Pumsam striya mithuni bhavametam tayor mitho hridaya granthi mahur atha griha kshetra sutapta vrittai atha griha kshetra sutapta vrittai janasya mohoya maham mameti. He just thinks that whatever is I see, Suta Apta Vrittai, his relatives, his daughter, his son, that is, and he is the owner of all that, his land. He thinks either, and he becomes Janasya Moham Aham Mameti. He thinks I am the enjoyer, I am the possessor, I am everything and nothing beyond that. So for these people, there is no scope of improvement. So unfortunate situation. However, the Lord is very merciful and He establishes a system where people like this can gradually progress. And that dharma is varnashram dharma, where you have a small child on the age of 5, he get the upanayanam samskar, he goes to a guru ashram and he spends the next 20 years as a brahmachari, celibate life. So the life starts with austerity there. And then because they get the Brahma Gayatri and all that, they become qualified to read Vedas, and they read Vedas, and what does the Vedas teach? We are not this body, we are spirit soul. So in Varnashram system, if properly executed, there is a hope that they will not fall down or glide down this path. So there is an amount of sense regulation there. Because if there is no regulation, we will end up in this situation. More sense gratification, more problems. And then after he gets married, even if in a grahastha life, there is still sense regulation there. Because, the union between man and wife is only for procreation, not for recreation. And then he spends 25 years or whatever in this age as a grahastha. But after that, what happens? He reaches a stage where he sees that his kids are now big enough to manage his wife and children. And then he goes as a vanaprastha. Again, detachment, sense regulation. And then finally, sannyas. So there is a system where people can actually slowly progress in this path of gradual purification. Right? Nayam deho deha bhajam narloke kashtan kaman arhate vidbujam ye tapo divyam putrakaye na satvam sudhye tasmad brahma saukyam tvanantam. Rishabdev, he is saying in the first prayers or first teachings to his son that do tapo divyam, do austerity which is transcendental, right? Which is, we can say varnashram dharma is not completely spiritual, but there are few elements in varnashram which is spiritual, and slowly they can progress. But the point is, varnashram dharma, where is varnashram system these days? And because so varnashram was established so that Manus and his descendants can nicely rule the kingdom and make sure that everybody is following varnashram. But in Kali Yuga, even the owners of varnashram, they have given up and they are hiding in the caves in Badrikashram. It is described in the 9th canto that by looking at the state of Kali Yuga, the controllers or the owners or the descendants of Manu, there were 2 descendants of Manu, and those 2 Manus, descendants, they disappeared from this world, and they are, we can say they are hiding in the caves of Badrikashram because they have given up. There is no hope in this world now to follow varnashram. So if the person who is in charge to institutionalize varnashram, he himself is missing, how can we expect this system to function? It's very, very difficult situation. That's why in his discussion, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tells Sri Ramananda Rai, Varnashram is good, but it is still external. In this age, that system is not going to function. And then Mahaprabhu says, tell me something which is more higher. And then he keeps on extending, what else is the option? And then he finally says that Krishna Katha is the only solution. And that is why we have Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam, as given by Srila Prabhupada, he gave this system to hear Srimad Bhagavatam every day, because this system is the most quickest and most powerful method. Of course, there are many scriptures, but for a Gaudiya Vaishnava, we accept Bhagavatam as the final conclusion, final concluding scripture. It is the summary of all the scriptures. Why? Because it is all authoritative. Even there is no space for, we can say, cheating religions, right? Bhagavatam kicks out the cheating religion, because we don't want any religion which is just for the namesake present. We need something, a system which is working, a working system. Dharma projita kaitavo atra paramo nirmatsaranam satam. The Kaitava Dharma is kicked out by Srimad Bhagavatam. And this Bhagavatam, the conclusion is Krishna is Swayam Bhagavan. Ete chamsa kala pumsas Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Mridayanti Yuge Yuge. This Bhagavatam concludes, even though there are unlimited forms of Supreme Lord, but then Krishna is put in a very special position. He is Swayam Bhagavan. He is not an avatar, he is an avatari. And what is the conclusion of Srimad Bhagavatam? In every canto you will see that it glorifies the chanting of the holy name and hearing of the holy name and hearing of the Krishna Katha is the most powerful method. Shinvatam Swakatha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanad Hridayantasto hi abhadrani Vidhunoti Suhrit Satam. That as we hear Krishna Katha, it purifies our heart, it purifies our existence. And slowly we develop attraction towards Krishna. Of course, we can say all the forms of the Supreme Lord is attractive, but yet the form of Krishna is the most attractive. Why? Even demons, they get purified by the attraction of Krishna. When Putana came to kill Krishna, ultimately the benefit or benediction she got from Krishna is highest than even we can say somebody who is a karmakandi. Karmakandi means somebody who is actually practicing varnashram dharma. To practice, there is little bit of bhakti, but his main intention is to please the demigods. What is his destination? He goes to heavenly planets. That's all. And he thinks that is the highest because he can stay there eternally. But that is not the fact. After some time, he eventually falls down from the heavenly planets. He can stay there for 10,000 years and all that. But eventually, he falls down. Krishna describes this in Bhagavad Gita. Tetam bhuktva swargalokam vishalam khine punye martya lokam vishanti evam trayi dharma manu prapanna gata gatam kama kama labhante. He can go after he creates a lot of pious credits. Like if you have a bank account, you can enjoy with a lot of your money. And with that, he goes to Swargaloka, not with money, but with his pious credits. But as soon as his credits are over, immediately he is kicked out of that place and he falls down to Martya Loka. Again, he comes back to this material world. But then, there are people who follow a process which is higher than this. And those are Gyanis. They understand that going to heavenly planets is temporary. Let me go beyond that. So they follow the process of Jnana. They understand that I am not this body, I am the soul. And they try to detach themselves from this material world, from this material attachment, from karma, reactions, everything. And ultimately, the destination which they achieve is Brahman, the impersonal form of the Lord, because that is what is their attraction. Because they don't want to see any forms now, they want to completely lose their form. They don't develop this attitude of service to the Supreme Lord, and hence they don't get a spiritual body, as described by Rupa Goswami in Nectar of Devotion. But then there are people who are more intelligent than those, and those people are actually devotees of Supreme Lord. They do devotional service, and by devotional service they actually develop this attitude of serving the Supreme Lord. And because they get completely purified by all the misgivings, then Krishna, by his mercy, he bestows spiritual body to those devotees. How are the devotees serving in the spiritual world? They don't have material body, but they have a body. What is that body? That body is spiritual body, completely spiritual body, spiritual senses, spiritual eyes, spiritual hands, spiritual legs, all that is engaged for service of the Supreme Lord. So looking at this very unfortunate situation of Kali Yuga, Krishna thought, okay, fine, I have now described, Bhagavad Gita, where I have declared Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja. Forget about all these religions, forget about Varnashram Dharma, just surrender unto me. He described that, but he never described how do we do that? How do we do that process of surrendering unto Krishna? And that's why Krishna himself comes in the form of Gauranga Mahaprabhu, Sriman Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to re-establish the whole process of how to practice pure devotional service. Because when he saw that then even after Bhagavad Gita was given, Kali Yuga was entering in the form of, that the demon who was killing the bull, he was breaking the legs of the bull. All the dharmas of all the 4 legs are the dharmas, right? Truthfulness, austerity, cleanliness, and mercy. So in the first canto, you will see how this Asura was killing the bull, and it was very unfortunate situation. Parikshit Maharaj disappeared, and then again dharma was getting declined. But then Krishna comes every age. Of course, in this age he is a very Channa avatar, he is disguised. But then he comes and establishes the dharma, the pure, the most powerful dharma, to get out of this material world. Not just that, but to attain the highest destination. And that's why he establishes the process of Nam Sankirtan. That's why he gives us Hare Krishna. Of course, we can say any of the forms or any of the names of the Lord are very, very powerful. Like in this case, Prabhupada describes how the constables of Yamarāja comes and arrest the jiva. In case of Ajamil, he didn't chant Krishna's name, he just chanted Narayana, and that too not with devotion. Accidentally he chanted Narayana. But what was the outcome? All of his past, present karmas were vanquished, and he got completely freed from those reactions. Of course, he did not achieve prema at that point. He had to practice sadhana bhakti and then attain prema. But then the point is, chanting of the holy names are the most powerful process. And it is described in our Upanishads. It always existed, but nobody cared about it. Mahaprabhu came and he showed those specific verses, including Bhagavatam, that Nam Sankirtan is the authorized process, or we can say the only practical process in this age of Kali Yuga. Harer Nama, Harer Nama, Harer Namaiva Kevalam, Kalau Nasti Eva, Nasti Eva, Nasti Eva Gatiranyatha. Kalau Dosho Nidhe Rajan, Hasti Eko Mahadguna, Yātanā-deha Krishnasya, Mukta Sangha Param Vrajet. That Kirtan of any of the names of Supreme Lord is good, but in this Kali Yuga, to get out of all the misgivings and unfortunate situation, Yātanā-deha Krishnasya, only Krishna Kirtan is the solution of every problem. And that's why this process has been made very, very simple, and he is I mean, imagine, he is giving this highest process of achieving Goloka Vrindavan to those people who are the most fallen in Kali Yuga, and that happens only by the mercy of Krishna. But that's not all. When he comes in the mood of Radharani, who is the highest devotee, and because devotees are more merciful than Krishna, he bestows, benedicts this highest process of chanting Hare Krishna. And he is not just giving Krishna, he is giving Radha and Krishna. Because Hare is Radhe. As we call by love, Radha is Radhe, Hara becomes Hare, and that is why we chant Hare Krishna. And sometimes people say this is Maha Mantra or Mantra. This is not just Mantra, this is the name of the Supreme Lord, the Nama. And that's why the Nama becomes very, very powerful. Nam Akari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shakti. Anyways, there are so many things which we can talk about it. But the whole point is, Sriman Mahaprabhu came to give us this process, which is most sublime process of chanting Krishna's holy name, and not just Krishna's holy name, chanting of Radha and Krishna's name. And that was again given to us by our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada. And that is what is established as a conclusion of Srimad Bhagavatam, that Nam Sankirtan is the only process. Nama Sankirtanam Yasya Sarva Papa Pranashanam Pranamo Dukkha Shamanaha Tam Namami Hari Param. This is the last concluding verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, that Nam Sankirtan is the only process which is practically possible in this age of Kali Yuga, which will actually give us the highest destination. I'll stop here for any questions, comments and reflections.
Thank you for the class, Prabhu. I just wanted to recommend that you keep giving the classes. Yeah. That's all.
Well, this is mercy of, I think, Bhrugupati Prabhu. We have to tell him. I am happy to serve Srimad Bhagavatam. But as I said, I am nobody. I am just, from in front of devotees like Sachitanaya Prabhu, Rabindranath Prabhu. I am like a small baby trying to take a small steps. If my service can bring any amount of pleasure to devotees, I think I will be, happy that my Gurudev is happy. So thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu met Ramananda Roy and he asked him how to achieve perfection of life, and Ramananda Roy gave that first verse, Varnasrama Charavata, Varnasram. So Lord Chaitanya wasn't that impressed. He said, so that's clear that if we actually follow the process of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for Kali Yuga, the Yuga Dharma, we don't even need to do the Varnashram Dharma. But Srila Prabhupada in his last days, when he went to New Vrindavan, he said that now I'm going to teach you how to work, how to live on the land, because even devotees were not actually properly following, and we fall into that level in which we still are within Varnashram Dharma. We're not properly doing it. So what would you say that for devotees, and for the inside, how to say, when you're preaching to the choir, this is it, Harinam Sankirtan. The people in general, in order for them to graduate a little bit. In the scriptures also say that if human civilizations is not a human civilization without Varnashram Dharma. Maybe any thoughts you could...
Of course, for bhakti, qualification is faith. If we have the shraddha, we can take up bhakti. But we see that most of the people in this world do not have the faith, do not have the shraddha in scriptures, in the words of Krishna. Of course, Srila Prabhupada, in his towards the end of his earthly pastimes, he did, we can say, emphasize on varnashram dharma a couple of times. I think he glorifies varnashram dharma in, I think, 6th canto and maybe 7th canto also, after Prahlad. Narada describes the glories of Prahlad Maharaj and all that. But actually, if you look at the first canto, the first few cantos where Prabhupada is giving his purports, in fact, in the introduction of Bhagavatam, he writes that varnashram dharma is superficial. It is not for devotees. He mentions that in the introduction in the Bhagavatam. And I think in the first canto, 3rd chapter, and few other places, he has given description that varnashram is for those who cannot practice bhakti. But in other places, he has given higher preferences and glorification of varnashram. So there are, we can say, I don't know, contradiction and all that. But the point is, but the fact is, we all have a material body. We have to maintain the material body. So it is a good idea to take a few of the rules from varnashram which can help and support the bhakti. For example, varnashram says, take bath 3 times a day. Keep yourself clean. We do that as devotees. We get up from Mangalarti, clean ourselves. We take bath. So cleaning is one of the rules which we can take from varnashram, because we have to maintain the body. Then there are laws of social interaction. How to interact with elders, how to interact with youngers, how to interact with the people with the same age. We can take those rules from varnashram and implement that in our daily life, which will support bhakti. However, as the definition given by Rupa Goswami, anya abhilashita shunyam jnana karmadi anavritam anukulyana krishnanushilanam bhakti uttama. We can take all those rules, but we should never think that karma and jnana is superior, or if I don't do that, then my bhakti is getting affected, or my bhakti is not going to give me result, because bhakti is beyond all this. Bhakti is nirguna, right? Because varnashram is, we can say, is a part of gunas, right? The highest guna in varnashram is sattva gun, which is still under material, right? But bhakti is beyond that, niraguna. So the point is, of course, we can just chant holy name and that is everything, because the nama of the Lord contains everything. But there is no, we can say, loss in taking the rules of varnashram, as much as it does not create disturbance in our bhakti. As long as it supports the bhakti, we can take that. I hope that answers, Prabhu, to some extent. Ata pummi duja sreshta, varnashram vibhaga. Samsiddhir haritoshanam. Yeah, so as long as we can please Hari by this taking varnashram, some rules, because some rules in varnashram are very, very strict. Like the Brahmana has to live in on just by begging alms. He cannot work. He cannot do anything. He just have to go to the market and find the grains, whatever is there in the marketplace, and just bring it home, whatever is remaining. So it's very austere. So as long as we can practice, make a nice balance which can support our bhakti, I think we can do that. Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu.
Oh, I just wanted to add that, sometimes it seems contradictory, some statements from Srila Prabhupada about culture, varnashram, his attitude towards it. But at least from my experience, it only appears contradictory if one isn't using a chronological view of it. But chronologically, at least to me, it's pretty clear Prabhupada's mood and mission kind of developed over time as Krishna conscious movement unfolded. And yeah, the emphasis was pretty strong at the end that he wanted the devotees to, obviously maybe not establish Varnashram Dharma as it was like in Treta Yuga or something, but to organize human society to help elevate people to the mode of goodness.
Yeah, as long as devotees can definitely establish, farm communities and whatever, but as long as they keep Nam Sankirtan in the forefront, I think it is fine, because with Nam Sankirtan being the forefront, people will get that ultimate. So, all right. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय, निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे, हरि हरि बोल। Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Prabhu. Your blessing, Prabhu. Blessing. Thank you.